Welcome to Shadow Storyteller. If you enjoy chilling tales rooted in American folklore, do not forget to like, subscribe, and leave a comment below. Your support helps bring more bedtime stories to life. What if the child you saw standing by the creek at dusk was never born at all? In the late autumn of 1963, just weeks before the world would shudder at the crack of a rifle in Dallas, a cold silence settled over the hollers of Pike County, Kentucky. The mountains there wear their mist like old shawls, and the trees lean inward as if guarding secrets too heavy for daylight. It was in this pocket of Appalachia, where electricity still flickered like hope and radios whispered more static than song, that a boy named Thaddeus Elmer Croft vanished without a trace. Thaddeus was 8 years old, with eyes the color of river clay and a habit of talking to the wind. His family lived in a cedar-sided cabin off Crooked Branch Road, a winding dirt path known more for its potholes than its people. His mother, Lavinia, often said he had the gift, seeing what others could not, hearing voices in the hum of crickets, naming shadows as if they were kin. His father, Orrin, dismissed it as mountain fancy. But on the evening of October 27th, when Thaddeus failed to return from checking the snares near Dry Fork Creek, even Orrin felt the dread coil low in his gut. The search began at moonrise. Neighbors brought lanterns and dogs, their breath curling white in the sharp air. They combed the rhododendron thickets, shouted into limestone crevices, and dragged the creek with ropes tied to mules. Nothing. No footprints led away from the water's edge. No broken branches betrayed a struggle. Only a single leather moccasin, stitched with faded blue thread, lay abandoned on a mossy rock, as if the boy had simply stepped out of his own skin and walked into the mist. For weeks, the Crofts kept a lantern burning in the front window. Lavinia left bowls of cornbread and wildberry jam on the porch, whispering, "Come home, Thad," as if he were merely late for supper. But the hollers gave no answer. Then, in mid-November, something stranger began. Marlo Henshaw, a retired schoolteacher who lived 3 ridges over, claimed she saw a child standing in her cornfield at twilight. He wore homespun trousers and no coat, despite the frost biting the earth. When she called out, he turned, just enough for her to glimpse his profile, but his face bore no eyes, only smooth skin stretched taut over bone. She fainted where she stood. Others soon came forward with similar sightings. A boy skipping stones on still water at midnight, a whisper calling from cellar doors, small handprints fogging up windows on windless nights. What unnerved the locals most was not the ghostly presence itself, but the fact that no photograph of Thaddeus existed. The Crofts owned no camera, and the schoolhouse burned down in '59, taking class rosters and memories with it. The only proof he'd ever lived was Lavinia's voice, trembling as she described the lullaby he hummed each night, a tune no one else had ever heard. Then, on Christmas Eve, Orrin Croft disappeared. He left his boots by the hearth, his pipe still warm in the ash. The cabin door swung open to the snow-dusted yard, and tracks led straight to Dry Fork Creek, where they ended abruptly, as though he had been plucked from the earth. The townsfolk debated. Some said grief had finally taken him. Others swore they heard 2 voices by the water that night, one low and broken, the other high and clear, singing that same strange lullaby. By spring, the Croft cabin stood empty, its porch sagging under neglect. Yet travelers passing through Pike County on fog-laden nights still report odd happenings. A child's laughter echoing from hollows with no houses. A small figure waving from the far bank of Dry Fork, vanishing when you blink. And sometimes, if the wind is just right, you might catch the faint strains of a song with no words, just hums, rising like smoke from a fire long gone cold. To this day, locals avoid the bend near Crooked Branch after sundown. They say Thaddeus didn't die. He simply became part of the land, the whisper in the pines, the chill down your spine when the fire crackles too loud. And if you leave a bowl of cornbread on a stump by the creek, you might find it gone by morning, though the ground around it remains untouched by footprints. The phantom child of Appalachia walks still, not lost, but waiting. Waiting for someone to remember his name. Waiting for someone to believe. If this tale of mystery and mountain silence stirred your imagination, please like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you'd like more stories like this before you drift off to sleep, hit that notification bell. Shadow Storyteller has many more whispers from the dark. Years passed, and the legend of Thaddeus Croft settled into the quiet hum of Appalachian folklore, told in hushed tones at church suppers, warned about during hunting season, and passed down like an heirloom too fragile to touch. Yet in the summer of 1978, nearly 15 years after the boy vanished, something stirred in Pike County that made even the old-timers lock their doors before dusk. It started with Jedediah Vale. Jedediah was a drifter, though he called himself a landscape recorder. He arrived in Pike County with a rusted pickup, a boxy camera slung over his shoulder, and notebooks filled with sketches of barns, bridges, and backwoods trails. He wasn't from the region, born in Portland, Oregon, and raised on stories of the Pacific Northwest, but something about the Appalachian ridges called to him. He claimed he was documenting vanishing America, but locals sensed a deeper hunger in his eyes, a restlessness that didn't match his polite manners. He rented a room above the general store in Virgie, a crossroads town barely marked on maps. For weeks, he wandered the hollows, capturing images of weathered porches and overgrown fields. He asked few questions, but when he did, they always circled back to the Croft place. Mrs. Elsbeth Mundy, who ran the store, warned him off. "That land don't like strangers," she said, wiping flour from her apron. "And the boy, some souls ain't meant to be photographed." But Jedediah didn't listen. On the evening of July 12th, he hiked up Crooked Branch Road with his camera, a thermos of black coffee, and a reel of Kodachrome film he'd saved for something true. The air was thick with cicadas, and the sky burned orange over Pine Mountain. He reached the Croft cabin just as twilight bled into night. The structure leaned like a tired man, its roof sagging under decades of rain, but the front window still held a single pane of glass, cracked yet intact. Jedediah set up his tripod. He waited. At exactly 8:43, according to the notes he later left behind, a figure appeared on the porch. Not a shadow. Not a trick of the light. A boy, barefoot, wearing suspenders and a shirt so faded it looked gray, stood beneath the eaves, hands clasped behind his back. He stared directly at Jedediah. No smile. No fear. Just stillness, as if time itself had paused to watch. Heart pounding, Jedediah raised his camera. The shutter clicked. The boy vanished. Not in a blur, not with a sound, but like a flame snuffed by an unseen hand. One moment there, the next, nothing. Not even a ripple in the air. Shaken but exhilarated, Jedediah developed the film in a darkroom he'd rigged in his motel bathroom. When the image emerged, he nearly dropped the negative. There, clear as dawn, stood Thaddeus Croft. Only his eyes were not closed or missing. They were wide open, black as pitch, and looking not at the camera, but past it. As if he saw Jedediah not as he was in 1978, but as he would be in the moments before his death. That night, Jedediah couldn't sleep. He kept hearing humming, soft, melodic, just below the threshold of hearing. He checked his room. No radio. No wind through the vents. Just that tune, the same lullaby Lavinia Croft had described, curling around his thoughts like smoke. He tried to leave Pike County the next morning. His truck wouldn't start. The battery was dead, though it had been fine the night before. Mechanics found nothing wrong. By noon, he gave up and walked back toward the hollow, drawn by something he couldn't name. He never returned. His camera was found 3 days later, half buried in the creek bed near Dry Fork. The film inside was ruined, melted, as if exposed to intense heat, though the water was icy cold. His notebooks, however, survived. In them, scrawled in frantic script across the final pages, were phrases like, "He knows I saw him," "The song is in my teeth," and "He doesn't want to be remembered. He wants to be joined." The last entry read, "I hear my mother calling me, but my mother's been dead since '52. 6 months later, in January of 1979, a hunter named Corbin Price stumbled upon a skeleton in a shallow cave behind a waterfall off Crooked Branch. The bones were small, child-sized, but the jawbone held adult molars. Stranger still, the ribs were fused in places, as if the body had tried to grow inward. Nestled in the ribcage was a rusted harmonica, its notes long silenced. And wrapped around one femur was a strip of leather, stitched with faded blue thread. Corbin fled the mountain that day and never hunted again. But the sightings didn't stop. In the 1980s, a young couple camping near the old Croft land reported waking to find their tent unzipped and a bowl of dried cornbread sitting just outside, perfectly preserved despite the rain. In 1995, a highway patrolman named Darius Meeks pulled over a boy walking barefoot down Route 23 at 2 in the morning. When he approached, the boy turned, smiled faintly, and said, "Tell Lavinia I'm warm now." Before Meeks could respond, the child stepped into the woods, and the temperature around the cruiser dropped 20 degrees in seconds. Then came the internet. In the early 2000s, ghost hunters arrived with night vision cameras and EMF readers. They live-streamed from the Croft property, joking at first, then growing silent as their equipment failed one by one. One video, now lost but described in forum posts, allegedly captured a voice whispering, "Take me home," in perfect harmony with the wind. The stream cut out. The crew never posted again. But the most unsettling chapter began in 2016. A woman named Eloan Finch, a folklorist from Berea College, decided to write her dissertation on Appalachian spectral children, with Thaddeus Croft as her central case. Unlike others, she didn't seek thrills. She sought understanding. She interviewed elderly residents, pored over county records, and even tracked down a surviving cousin of Lavinia Croft, who gave her a small wooden box sealed with wax. Inside was a lock of hair, blonde, fine, and a note written in shaky cursive. "He was never mine to keep, only to love." Eloan stayed in the area for months. She slept in a trailer near the hollow, played recordings of Appalachian lullabies, and left offerings: wild strawberries, river stones, a tin whistle. One morning, she woke to find the whistle gone, and in its place, a single drawing etched into the dirt: a boy holding hands with a man, walking toward a house with smoke rising from the chimney. Tears filled her eyes. She knew it was Orrin and Thaddeus. She never published her dissertation. Instead, she left academia and moved to a cabin 10 miles west of Virgie. Locals say she still walks the ridges at dawn, humming softly, always facing east. And sometimes, on still nights when the fog hugs the treetops, hikers report hearing two voices, one young, one old, singing together in perfect harmony. Not mournful, not frightening, just together. Because in Appalachia, some losses never truly end. They simply change shape. And the phantom child of Appalachia? He's not haunting. He's waiting. Waiting for someone to understand that not all ghosts want to be laid to rest. Some just want to be found. In the autumn of 2021, a storm unlike any other rolled through eastern Kentucky. Not a hurricane, those rarely claw this far inland, but a slow, brooding tempest that hung over the ridges for 11 days straight. Rain fell in sheets, creeks swelled into rivers, and landslides peeled bark from the mountainsides like skin from bone. It was during that deluge that the Croft cabin finally collapsed, its rotted beams surrendering to time and water with a groan heard half a mile away. But from the wreckage, something emerged. Not a ghost. Not a relic. A journal. It was found by a teenager named Cale Brannock, who'd taken shelter beneath what remained of the porch while his pickup sputtered through flooded backroads. Cale wasn't from Pike County. He was visiting his aunt in Virgie after a fight with his dad in Lexington, but he'd heard the stories. Everyone had. At first, he thought the journal was just an old ledger, waterlogged and ruined. But when he flipped it open under the dim beam of his phone flashlight, he saw handwriting, delicate, looping, unmistakably a woman's. Lavinia Croft's final words. Most pages were blurred beyond reading, the ink bleeding into ghosts of themselves. But 3 entries remained clear, as if preserved by something more than chance. The first read, "Thad saw the watcher long before I did. He called it the man with no face, and said it lived in the walls. I thought it was make-believe. But last night, I heard scratching inside the chimney. Not rats. Too deliberate." The second, Orrin dug a hole behind the smokehouse and buried something wrapped in burlap. He wouldn't tell me what. When I pressed him, he wept. Not like a man who'd done wrong, but like one who'd tried to stop it too late. The third, dated October 29th, 1963, 2 days after Thad vanished, was the most chilling. It wears his skin now. I saw it by the creek at dawn. Same clothes, same stride. But its eyes, they don't blink. And when it smiled, its mouth opened too wide. I will not let it take Orrin too. If you find this, do not look for Thaddeus. Look for what followed him home. Cale didn't tell anyone at first. He kept the journal hidden beneath his mattress, reading those lines over and over until they coiled in his dreams. He began noticing things. The way dogs in Virgie would go silent when passing Crooked Branch, how the creek's water sometimes ran clear upstream but black downstream, as if something dark moved beneath it. And then one evening he saw it himself. He was driving back from the gas station, rain still drizzling, windshield wipers thumping like a slow heartbeat. Just past the turnoff to Dry Fork, a figure stood in the road, small, dressed in old-fashioned clothes, one hand raised as if to wave. Cale slammed the brakes. But when his headlights swept over the spot, the boy was gone. No footprints in the mud. No rustle in the underbrush. Only a single harmonica lying in the center of the asphalt, slick with rain. He picked it up. It was warm. That night, Cale played the harmonica. Not because he knew how, but because his fingers moved on their own, pressing and blowing as if guided by memory not his own. The notes that came out were uneven, mournful, and achingly familiar. It was the lullaby. The same one Lavinia hummed. The same one Jedediah heard in his motel room. The same one Darius Meeks claimed echoed in his patrol car decades ago. By morning, Cale knew what he had to do. He returned to the Croft property with a shovel, a camera, and a voice recorder. Ignoring the chill that prickled his neck the moment he crossed the property line, he dug where Lavinia's journal said Orrin had buried the burlap bundle. The earth was soft from the rain, and after only 2 feet, his shovel struck something solid. Not a box. Not a body. A doll. Carved from hickory, about the size of a child's forearm, with crude features burned into the wood. Its eyes were 2 smooth river stones glued in place. Around its neck hung a tiny leather pouch, empty, but smelling faintly of sage and iron. And etched into its back, in shaky script, was a name, Thad. Cale's breath caught. This wasn't a toy. It was a tether. Folk magic ran deep in these hills. Ways to bind spirits, to call them, to keep them close. Had Orrin tried to anchor his son's soul? Or had he tried to trap something else that wore his son's face? That evening, Cale placed the doll on the stump where people once left offerings. He lit a candle, played the harmonica once more and whispered into the recorder, "If you're still here, show me the truth." Then he waited. At exactly 9:17, according to the timestamp on his phone's audio file, the wind stopped. The crickets fell silent. And from the woods came the sound of footsteps. Not one pair. One light and quick. The other heavy, dragging slightly, as if the walker carried a great weight. Cale didn't move. He held his breath. A voice, soft, young, trembling, spoke from the darkness. "You brought it back." Another voice, older, rougher, thick with sorrow. "We tried to run, but it followed. It always follows." Cale whispered, "Who is it?" Silence. Then the younger voice again, closer now. "The thing that lives between the ticks of the clock. The one that walks when no one's looking. It saw me watching, and it liked what it saw." Cale's recorder captured the next sound perfectly. A low, wet click, like a jaw unhinging. He ran. He didn't look back. Didn't stop until he reached his aunt's porch, heart hammering, the harmonica still clutched in his fist. The next day, he mailed the journal, the doll, and the audio file to the Kentucky Folklore Archives in Berea, with a note that read, "Burn it," or better yet, forget it ever existed. But forgetting is not how these stories work. Because in the spring of 2023, 2 campers reported finding a harmonica nailed to a tree deep in the Daniel Boone National Forest. Beneath it, carved into the bark, were 3 words, "He is hungry." And in the summer of 2024, during a heat wave that cracked the earth and sent cattle lowing in distress, a little girl from Hazard wandered off during a family picnic near Pine Mountain. Searchers found her 6 hours later, sitting cross-legged by a dry creek bed, clutching a hickory doll. When asked where she'd gotten it, she looked up with glassy eyes and said, "Thad gave it to me. He said I could stay with him. He said it's quieter there." She never spoke again. Now, the locals don't just avoid Crooked Branch after dark, they avoid naming Thaddeus aloud. They say speaking his name 3 times invites the watcher to glance your way. And once it sees you, it begins to learn your shape. But here's what no one tells you. Thaddeus isn't evil. He never was. He's trapped. Caught between this world and whatever lies beyond the veil of mist and memory. And the thing that followed him home, the thing that wears his face when it walks, feeds not on flesh, but on longing. On the ache of parents who call into empty rooms. On the hope of strangers who leave cornbread on stumps. Every time someone searches for him, the watcher grows stronger. Every time someone believes, it gets closer to wearing a real skin again. So the truth is this: the phantom child of Appalachia isn't the ghost. He's the bait. And the real horror isn't that he's still out there. It's that he's waiting for you to care enough to come find him. By the winter of 2025, the legend had begun to bleed beyond the hollers of Pike County. Podcasters arrived with shotgun mics and thermal cameras. True crime influencers uploaded deep dive videos titled, "The Thaddeus Hoax, Real or Ritual?" Tourists left trinkets at the base of the fallen Croft chimney, plastic toys, handwritten notes, even baby shoes, hoping for a sign, a whisper, a brush with the uncanny. But the mountain gave nothing. Not to them. It only answered those who came not for spectacle, but for silence. Among them was a woman named Isolde Voss. Isolde was not a journalist, not a YouTuber, not even a believer. She was a conservator from the Smithsonian, sent by a private donor who'd acquired Cale Brannock's sealed archive after the Kentucky Folklore Archives mysteriously lost the materials during a basement flood. The donor, anonymous, wealthy, and deeply unsettled, wanted the artifacts authenticated. But Isolde, trained in the delicate art of preserving memory, felt something else the moment she held the hickory doll in her gloved hands. It was breathing, not literally, but the wood pulsed faintly under her fingertips, as if a slow heartbeat thrummed beneath its grain. The riverstone eyes, when held to light, reflected not the room, but a forest at twilight, mist curling around pine trunks that didn't exist in any photograph she'd seen. And the leather pouch, though empty, exhaled a scent like burnt honey and wet soil each time it was moved. She requested permission to visit the site. Her superiors refused. Too remote, they said. Too many disappearances. But Isolde had grown up in the Smokies, raised by a grandmother who spoke to storms and left salt lines at doorways. She knew when a place was calling. She went anyway. She arrived in Vergy on the first Friday of November, the air sharp with the promise of snow. The town had changed, gas stations replaced general stores, satellite dishes dotted rooftops, but the silence remained. People spoke in half-sentences when she asked about the Crofts. Children fell quiet when she passed. Only Eloan Finch, now gray-haired but sharp-eyed, agreed to meet her. They sat on Eloan's porch, wrapped in wool blankets, steam rising from mugs of chicory coffee. "You shouldn't be here," Eloan said, not unkindly. "Not if you're planning to take something back with you." "I don't want to take," Isolde replied. "I want to understand. Why does this place hold on so tightly?" Eloan stared into the trees. "Because it was betrayed." She explained that long before Thaddeus, before even the Crofts, the land around Dry Fork Creek was sacred to the Shawnee, known as Wapacomica, the place where voices return. Settlers drove them out, but the mountain remembered. When Orrin Croft dug that hole behind the smokehouse, he hadn't buried a doll. He'd dug up something older, something left there to keep watch. And in his grief, he tried to bind his son's spirit to it, hoping to keep Thad close. But the old thing had other plans. It took the offering and twisted it. "The doll isn't Thad," Eloan whispered. "It's a mirror, and whatever looks into it long enough becomes what it sees." That night, Isolde camped near the creek, far from the ruins of the cabin. She placed the doll on a flat stone, set up audio and motion sensors, and waited. Midnight came. Then one. At 2:13, the temperature dropped so fast her breath turned to fog. The sensors spiked. Her camera glitched, showing only static, except for one frame, captured by chance. A boy's hand resting on the doll's head. But the fingers were too long. The nails, black and split. Isolde didn't run. She knelt. "Thaddeus," she said softly, "I'm not here to take you. I'm here to say you're remembered. And that's enough." The wind stilled. For the first time in over 60 years, the creek made no sound. Then a whisper, not from the woods, but from the doll itself, "Tell her I'm sorry I left the cornbread." Isolde's eyes filled. "Lavinia knew you didn't leave. She knew you were taken." The pause. Then, softer, "Will you stay until I'm not afraid?" Isolde stayed. She did not sleep. She hummed old mountain tunes her grandmother taught her, songs about rivers and lost love and crows that carry messages. And as dawn pinked the sky, the dolls would begin to crack. Not violently. Gently, like an egg hatching. By sunrise, it had split clean down the middle, revealing nothing inside but dust and a single blue thread, the same kind that once stitched Thaddeus's moccasin. The sensors recorded nothing after that. No voices. No anomalies. Just birdsong and the slow drip of melting frost. Isolde packed her gear. She left the broken doll on the stone. And as she walked back toward the road, she turned once. There, on the far bank of Dry Fork, stood two figures, side by side. One tall, one small. They did not wave. They simply watched her go. She never filed a report, never spoke of it to her employer. But months later, a small plaque appeared near the creek, paid for anonymously. It read only, "In memory of those who listened." Back in Washington, Isolde resigned her position. She bought a cabin in Letcher County, not far from Eloan. She teaches local children how to press leaves, how to bind books, how to listen to the wind without fear. Because she learned the truth that night. The phantom child of Appalachia was never a ghost to be feared. He was a wound in the land, a tear in the veil between what is lost and what is loved. And sometimes, the only way to heal such a wound is not to pull it closed, but to sit beside it, in silence, and say, "I see you." Now, fewer people come searching. But those who do, they leave not offerings, but apologies. For disturbing the quiet. For turning sorrow into spectacle. And sometimes, on the clearest nights of the year, when the stars press close and the creek runs silver under moonlight, you might hear it, a harmonica, playing one last note, then stopping as if finally satisfied. Because Thaddeus didn't need to be found. He needed to be forgiven. And somewhere, deep in the bones of the mountain, a father and his son walk home at last. No longer hunted, no longer hollow. Just two shadows among the pines, finally at peace. But peace, in places like Pike County, is never the end. It is only the eye of the storm. In the spring of 2026, the rains returned. Not the gentle, soaking drizzle of mountain springs, but a violent, unrelenting downpour that turned roads to rivers and cell towers to silent monoliths. When the storm finally broke, the land was changed. Trees lay uprooted, creeks carved new paths, and from the mud near Dry Fork Creek, something else surfaced. Not bones, not artifacts, a photograph. It was found by a volunteer trail crew clearing debris from the old Croft property. Wedged between two limestone slabs, preserved beneath a layer of silt and roots, was a yellowed square of paper, its edges softened by decades underground. The image showed a family, a man with tired eyes and suspenders, a woman in a floral dress holding a baby, and a small boy standing slightly apart, one hand raised as if shielding his face from the sun. On the back, in faded ink, were the words, "Croft Family, October 1959. May God keep us whole." It was the only known photograph of Thaddeus Croft. News of the discovery spread faster than wildfire. Within days, historians, archivists, and a handful of determined ghost tourists descended on Virgie. The photo was authenticated by 3 independent experts: paper stock, chemical development, even the style of the Kodak logo matched late 50s production. But what truly unsettled everyone was the boy's expression. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't frowning. He was looking past the camera, past the photographer, past the moment, into something unseen. And his shadow, cast long by the afternoon sun, did not match his stance. It leaned away from him as if pulled by another light. Isolde Voss heard the news while grading student portfolios in her one-room schoolhouse. She didn't go to see the photo. She already knew what it meant. "They think it's proof," she told Eloan over coffee one evening. "But it's not. It's a warning." Eloan nodded. "The land gives back what it needs to, not what we want." And then the dreams began. Not just for Isolde. Not just for those who'd visited the hollow. Across eastern Kentucky, people started waking in the dead of night, hearts racing, mouths dry, with the same image burned into their minds. A boy standing at the foot of their bed, holding the photograph, silently mouthing 3 words, "Don't look back." Some dismissed it as mass hysteria. Others blamed contaminated well water. But in the hills, where folklore is lived and not just told, the old-timers knew better. They shuttered their windows earlier. They stopped humming lullabies to their children. And they whispered a single phrase among themselves, "He's remembering." Because the truth no one dared speak aloud was this: Thaddeus hadn't been freed that night by the creek. He'd been reminded. Remembered things have weight. Memory is a kind of gravity. And when enough people believe in a story, truly believe, it begins to shape the world around it. In June, a hiker vanished near Pine Mountain. His backpack was found neatly placed beside a rock, his water bottle full, his phone still recording audio. The last 30 seconds captured only breathing, 2 rhythms, one fast and panicked, the other slow and steady, and then a single sentence, spoken in a child's voice. "You can stay with us now." Search teams found nothing. In July, a local radio station in Hazard began broadcasting static at exactly 2:13 a.m. Listeners who tuned in swore they heard faint harmonica notes buried in the white noise. The station denied any anomaly. But the next morning, every single employee called in sick. None returned to work. Then came the letters. Handwritten envelopes, addressed to no one in particular, began appearing in mailboxes from Virgie to Whitesburg. Inside each was a single sentence, copied in the same looping script as Lavinia Croft's journal. "He is learning your name." Isolde received one on August 3rd. Her name wasn't on the envelope, but inside, written in ink that smelled faintly of river clay, were the words, "Isolde, you left the door open." That night, she returned to Dry Fork Creek. Not with equipment, not with questions. Just herself, a blanket, and a jar of fireflies she'd caught at dusk, old mountain custom for guiding lost souls home. She sat on the same stone where she'd left the broken doll. The creek murmured, the pines sighed, and then from the woods came footsteps. But not 2 this time. 3. A man. A boy. And something in between, tall, thin, its silhouette shimmering like heat off asphalt. Isolde didn't flinch. "You followed me back," she said. The boy stepped forward. Thaddeus. His eyes were clear now, blue, like mountain sky. "It's not following," he said. "It's waking." "The watcher?" she asked. "It was never watching us," Thaddeus replied. "It was waiting for us to watch it back." And in that moment, Isolde understood. The more people sought Thaddeus, the more they gave the watcher eyes. Every camera pointed at the hollow, every podcast episode, every tourist who whispered his name. It fed the thing not with fear, but with attention. And attention, in the unseen world, is a kind of life. "What do we do?" she asked. Thaddeus looked at his father, Orrin, solid now, no longer transparent, and then at the shifting figure behind them. "We stop telling." "Stop telling the story?" "No," said Orrin, voice rough but calm. "Stop telling it wrong." They had been painting Thaddeus as a victim, a ghost, a mystery to be solved. But he was never any of those things. He was a threshold. A door left ajar between the seen and unseen. And the only way to close it wasn't with silence, but with truth. So Isolde did the one thing no one else had done. She sat by the creek the next morning and told the Rayall story, not to an audience, not to a camera, but to the land itself. She spoke of Lavinia's love, of Orrin's guilt, of Jedediah's curiosity, of Cale's courage, of her own need to fix what couldn't be fixed. She didn't dramatize. She didn't embellish. She simply said, "This happened, and it hurt, and that's enough." When she finished, the wind shifted. The creek ran clearer than it had in decades. The pines straightened, as if relieved of a burden. And the photograph, now kept in a locked drawer at the county museum, began to fade, not from damage, but as if the image itself was dissolving back into memory. By autumn, the letters stopped. The radio static ceased. Hikers returned without incident. And when a group of college students tried to live stream from the Croft site on Halloween night, their cameras showed only empty trees, and their audio captured nothing but distant coyotes. Because the story was no longer hungry. It had been fed, not with fear, but with honesty. Now, if you walk the ridges near Dry Fork Creek at twilight, you might still feel a presence. But it won't follow you. It won't whisper your name. It will simply be there, like the mist, like the moss on stone, like the quiet ache of a lullaby half remembered. And if you leave a bowl of cornbread on the stump, it will still be there in the morning. Not because no one took it, but because no one needs to anymore. Yet even the quietest endings leave echoes. 2 winters after Isolde's vigil by the creek, in the deep hush of January 2028, a package arrived at the post office in Vergy. No return address. No postage stamp. Just her name, Isolde Voss, written in a hand so familiar it made her breath catch. Inside the plain brown paper was a small wooden box, lined with faded blue fabric. Nestled within lay a harmonica, newly polished, its brass gleaming like morning sun on frost. Tucked beneath it was a slip of paper, yellowed at the edges but crisp in the center, as if freshly written. On it 2 lines, "Thank you for closing the door." But someone left a window open. Isolde's blood ran cold. She knew that handwriting. Not Thaddeus's. Not Oren's. Lavinia Croft's. Impossible, Lavinia had died in 1971, alone and weary, in a nursing home in Ashland. Her grave was marked with a simple stone. And yet, here was her script, clear as memory, bearing a warning that felt more like an invitation. That night, Isolde lit a kerosene lantern and walked the old trail to Dry Fork alone. Snow crunched underfoot, and the mountains stood like sentinels wrapped in white. The creek, frozen at its edges, whispered beneath a skin of ice. She placed the harmonica on the stone where she'd once left the doll. No wind stirred. No voices rose. But when she turned to leave, she saw it. A single set of footprints leading away from the creek, small, barefoot, pressing deep into the snow. And beside them, not overlapping, not matching, a second trail, larger, booted, deliberate. They walked side by side, heading not into the woods, but toward the road, the very path that led out of the hollow and into the world beyond. Someone had taken them, or worse, someone had brought them back. Isolde followed the tracks until they vanished at the edge of Route 230, melted by the salt and tire heat of passing cars. The message was clear, the boundary had been crossed. What once stayed in the hollers was now moving through towns, gas stations, schoolyards. She returned home and burned no sage, rang no bells. Instead, she did something far older. She wrote. Not a report, not a warning broadcast, but a letter, sealed in wax, addressed to no one and everyone. She left it on the counter of the Vergy General Store with a note, for whoever finds it first. Inside, she told the full truth, not the folk tale, not the ghost story, but the raw, aching reality. She wrote of how grief can become a cage, how memory can become a tether, and how some wounds don't heal by being forgotten, but by being honored without spectacle. She named the danger not as the watcher, but as the human hunger to turn pain into entertainment. And she ended with this. Asterisk, if you feel drawn to the hollow, ask yourself why. Are you seeking truth, or just a thrill? Because the moment you treat Thaddeus as a character in your story, you give the watcher a voice in yours. Asterisk. She didn't sign it. She didn't need to. Within weeks, the letter was copied, passed hand to hand, read aloud at church potlucks and fire department meetings. Teenagers who once dared each other to spend the night near the Croft ruins now walked past without glancing. Tour buses rerouted. Even the podcasters grew quiet, their episodes replaced with disclaimers. This story is not for consumption. For a season, the hollow slept. But then, in the golden heat of late September, a boy from Prestonsburg went missing during a school field trip to the Daniel Boone National Forest. He was found 3 days later, sitting cross-legged at the base of an old oak deep in the Croft drainage. He was unharmed, hydrated, calm. In his lap was a harmonica. When asked where he'd been, he looked at his teacher with eyes too old for his face and said, "Visiting friends." He couldn't, or wouldn't, say more. And when they took the harmonica from him, he wept for hours, whispering only one phrase, "They promised I could stay." Doctors called it dissociation, trauma. But the boy's grandmother, a Shawnee elder from Paintsville, knew better. She visited Isolde in secret. "It's not haunting," the woman said, her voice like dry leaves. "It's adoption." In the old ways, children lost too soon were believed to linger not out of sorrow, but because they had no one to carry them across. The Watcher, she explained, wasn't a demon, it was a hollow spirit, a Manitou unanchored, seeking a vessel. And Thaddeus, in his innocence, had become its first host. Now it sought others, not to harm, but to fill the silence inside itself with borrowed lives. "The only way to stop it," the elder said, "is to offer it a name. Not Thaddeus's, not Oren's, but its own." Isolde understood. The Watcher had no identity, only reflection. It wore faces because it had none, gave voices because it had none. To name it was to give it form, and with form came the possibility of release. That winter solstice, beneath a sky so clear it ached, Isolde returned to Dry Fork one last time. She brought no offerings, no recordings, only a small clay bowl filled with creek water and a strip of deerskin inscribed with Shawnee syllabics, letters that meant, "You who walk between, be known." She placed the bowl on the stone and spoke aloud, her voice steady despite the cold. "We see you, not as monster, not as ghost, but as you are, lost, longing, and lonely. Your name is not Thaddeus. It is not ours to borrow. So I give you this, Nikawish, the one who waits in the in-between. May it carry you home." For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the ice on the creek cracked, not with force, but with relief. A single note rang out from the harmonica left months before, though no hand touched it. And in the mist that rose from the water, two figures appeared, Thaddeus and Oren, watching not Isolde, but something beside them. A third shape, taller now, clearer, its edges no longer shifting. It bowed its head. Then, slowly, it turned and walked into the trees, not vanishing, but leaving. Thaddeus looked at Isolde one last time. He smiled, not with sadness, but with gratitude. Then he took his father's hand, and they followed. The next morning, the harmonica was gone. The bowl lay empty, cracked clean in half. And the footprints in the snow led only one way. Away from the road, deeper into the mountain. No one has seen them since. But sometimes, on nights when the stars are sharp and the wind holds its breath, hikers swear they hear faint music, not from the valley, but from the highest ridge. And if you listen closely, you'll notice something new. Two harmonicas now, playing in harmony, no longer mournful, but whole. Because the phantom child of Appalachia was never the horror. The horror was our need to keep him trapped in our stories. Now, he walks free, not as a ghost, not as a warning, but as a memory honored, a soul released. And the hollow? It's quiet again. Not empty, just finally at rest. But rest, in the bones of Appalachia, is never truly permanent. 3 nights ago, on the anniversary of Thaddeus Croft's disappearance, a state trooper responding to a disabled vehicle near Crooked Branch Road found the driver's door wide open, engine still running, coffee cup warm in the holder. The driver, a logistics manager from Lexington named Raylan Hess, was gone. No signs of struggle. No footprints in the frost. Only his phone, left on the passenger seat, recording. The audio file, recovered and sealed by authorities, runs 4 minutes and 17 seconds. For the first 3 minutes, there is only the hum of the engine and the occasional rustle of wind. Then, at 3 minutes and 9 seconds, a child's voice, soft, close, as if speaking just over the driver's shoulder, says, "You can see us now, can't you?" The pause. Heavy breathing. Then Raylan's trembling reply, "I wasn't looking for you. I swear." The child's voice again closer. But you knew the story. You listened. That's enough. At 3 minutes and 42 seconds, a second voice joins, older, rougher, calm in a way that chills deeper than fear. She thought it was over. She named it. She sent it away. Silence for 10 seconds. Then, the child, whispering directly into the microphone. Names don't break bonds. They make them stronger. The engine cuts off abruptly. The final seconds contain only footsteps, 2 sets, walking away from the car, and one last sound, the wet, slow click of a harmonica being placed on the hood. Raylan Hess has not been seen since. And this morning, in the mailbox of every household within 10 miles of Dry Fork Creek, including Isolde Voss's, a single item appeared. Not a letter. A photograph. The same family portrait found in 2026, but now, a fourth figure stands behind them, just at the edge of the frame. So thin. Its face blurred, not by motion, but as if the camera refused to hold its shape. And in its hand, barely visible, is a harmonica. On the back, in fresh ink that smells of iron and wet clay, are 3 words. Asterisk, we're not alone. Because the truth no one wanted to face is this. The watcher was never just one. It was never just waiting. It was gathering. And now, with every story told, every listener who leaned in too close, every voice that whispered Thaddeus's name into the dark, it has found its choir.